Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining on time. As Akshay already shared, please introduce yourself in chat. We'd love to know a little about who you are, your name, organization, geography, and domain of work, stakeholders you work with, and any experience or questions with qualitative data specifically. Those can come in whenever during the whole session, but if you have something that you have in mind, we'd love to hear already. We'll start the session now. I am Yashna. I'm one of the co-founders at Dots. And with me, Akshay is also going to take this session. He's also the co-founder of Dots. So we're very excited to have you all here. And today's topic is, as you all know, working with qualitative evidence in rural livelihoods. We've tried our best to replicate some of the data from rural livelihoods, but we'd love to hear from you all throughout the session in case we've missed out on something and something should be added. So very quickly, I'd love to start with what DOTS is, in case you all haven't heard about us. DOTS is a platform that transforms fragmented qualitative data into structured and actionable insights, enabling organizations like yours to make evidence driven decisions at scale. So that's been our focus for some time now. And we've been working with multiple organizations to build their systems on qualitative data, using different kinds of qualitative data, putting it next to the quantitative data as well. But for us, our focus is qualitative data first, because we feel there's value in giving importance to that nuance on ground and the voices and stories from the ground. We'll get started with engaging you all in some questions and answers. So please be active on chat. I'd love to hear from you all what kinds and forms of qualitative data you already work with. You've seen that in your work. If you can just share in chat so we know what are we dealing with, what are we starting with. So please share on chat. If somebody wants to also talk about it, we could hold space. But I think just to accommodate everyone, we'd love to have the chat running. Case studies, FGDs, ideas. Thanks, Priyanshi, for getting us started. Anything else? Interviews, videos. Super. Mainly FGDs, KIIs, IDIs. Okay, that's also similar to Dia's input. Photo voice. Would love to know, Sydney, what photo voice means, but that's an interesting point. Super. Anything else that we feel we've missed? Or yes, I think photo voice means photo and voice, I guess. Sydney would love to know if that's correct. Participant observations, feedback forms, counseling, FGDs, narrative via film, short campaigns. All right. These are some interesting input, and I think we're going to cover some part of that through the session. So, feedback from various stakeholders. Great. And we've also divided some of the forms of qualitative data that we have encountered and how we've navigated. So we'll take you through that through the session. But thank you so much for sharing your input. Just one second. Could you also share with all this qualitative data the forms of qualitative data that you shared, what are the challenges dealing with qualitative data? What are some things that you faced organizing? Okay. All right. Organizing, finding patterns, coding, pattern finding, weaving in policy, presenting, analyzing, and analysis of bulk data, quantifying it, making common meaning from anecdotal information. That's superb. Anything else that we are missing? we'd love to see those challenges coming, just to also share some of the ones which we hear quite a lot in terms of the problems with call data. You don't have enough call data in some cases, you have too much qualitative data, you don't have the right qualitative data to make sense of it, or sometimes it's only success stories and there aren't any other factors that are included. um, Nobody wants to read, funders also need numbers. So these are also some with what you are adding, and there's some really interesting points that are coming in which are find values and value in those stories. Superb. Analyzing the change over time through qualitative feedback. That's superb. That's an amazing point, Kanika. Thank you. And so just also sharing some of the realities of call data, where we feel, I mean, these are also realities which are not something that are completely solved for, but what are we're going to consider some of these through the session and talk about it. Few are on the screen, few are something that will get covered. One being the data quality varies in the part where you at the collection stage. There are a lot of languages, especially when you work with rural livelihoods. Multiple tools have data, multiple ways in which data is saved, and that doesn't talk to each other. There are different stakeholders and different voices. How do we deal with that? And what a lot of you said, how do you make sense of it? So, too much nuance, how to make sense of that. So, we're going to cover some of these aspects, translations and local languages, as Glenna said. We're going to cover a few of these through the session. Also, just a point to make, this is not something anybody has fully figured out, but we are working with different methods to figure it out with organizations. So I will, and we'll take you through this through a case study. I'll stop screen share and give this to Akshay to take it forward. Just 1 second. Yeah.
Thanks, Yashna. So throughout the hour today, we thought that rather than sharing things sort of in isolation, we'll ground some of the principles or techniques that we talk about in an actual case study. So, a few weeks ago, we had done a webinar on education. And so we had a case study of an NGO that works with state governments to do capacity building with teachers. This time, because our topic is rural livelihood, there are many different kinds of programs and non-profits working in this space. There are many different, types of rural livelihood programs. And so the, example that we're taking is an organization that this is a fictional example, who is working with small and marginal farmers to improve market access through collective institutions. So, we know what these are. In India, we call them farmer producer organizations. And this, non-profit is working across 6 states with about 3 FPOs in each state, right? So they're building up evidence by working with 3 FPOs. And what they're doing is they're helping farmers sort of come together, sell through the FPO, so that they strengthen their bargaining power, right? So that's the case study that we're looking at. So with that in mind, let's move forward. The idea is that, very often when we think about data, we want you to think in 2 broad stages, right? One is around how is that data collected and how is that organized and gotten ready for the next stage, which is around analysis and decision making, right? Of course, these stages are, it's slightly artificial to separate them, but it's useful when you're thinking about it in terms of structuring your entire system, right? And while we've talked about analysis. I think what we've realized in our experience is that if you don't set up your collection and organization well, you're not going to be able to do the sort of analysis that you want to. And it's a issue and a challenge that we keep seeing. And just to reiterate some of those challenges that Yashna mentioned while collecting and organizing, The quality of data varies. Like someone in the chat mentioned that especially in certain domains like rural livelihoods, you have to grapple with the fact that that qualitative data will come in local languages very often because it's a multi-stakeholder program. You're using multiple different tools from which that data is coming. So, and that data doesn't talk to each other, or you have different tools for managing the data, for analysis of data, and that doesn't talk to each other. And lastly, you have field staff, community voices. Those are sort of separated, and you're not able to bring those together if you're able to bring them in at all, right? Um, and so let's start with the first issue, right? Which is from whom and how is the data collected, right? And this is a fundamental one because your analysis is going to be only as good as the quality, quantity, and variability of the data that comes in, right? And when the second point will be around how do you structure that data, even as you are collecting it or after you have collected it, to make it available for analysis, and a small point around how you can think of it in terms of a system that works for your program and the realities operationally that you have in your program. So let's first talk about, from whom and how is this data collected, right? Uh, the key is that one has to think carefully about the program that you have. So in the case study that I mentioned, the way that it is set up is that there is a central program team that looks at data from across 6 states, and then each state has a regional supervisor, and then each regional supervisor manages, 3 field officers, and each field officer is attached to one FPO and the farmers, within that FPO. So we've kind of thought about, okay, if that is the whole thing, how, who is contributing what data? And the important thing is that that data can come in from all these different sorts of contributors. In our case study, we're going to show you who all that data comes in from, right? So what could those types of inputs be? You can have direct user or community voice. So from farmers in our case, if it is a education project through students, in the health space from patients, and they can be talking about outcomes, experiences, challenges, or barriers. Um, you can then look at program or field staff reporting, and that's really, really useful because they're going to tell you what's actually happening on the ground. What are some operational challenges? What are their observations? And this becomes critical because you have a certain plan when you start a program, when you design a program. But when that program hits the field, it confronts reality. And field staff, if they are given an opportunity to report actually what they're experiencing, it can be a very, very valuable resource in monitoring and learning and iterating the program design so that your program is successful. But I just want to put this question now back to you. We've gotten a couple of types of inputs. Who else can we get input from? And what are maybe other sources of data that we might have? We'll just take a minute. If people can please put in chat. So to reiterate the question, we have a couple of types of inputs here. Lovely, somebody said government officials. We could get data from government officials. GIS data, fantastic. Although GIS data won't be qualitative necessarily, but yes, GIS data is also a useful source of data and can act as a good balance with the qualitative.
Yeah, it will be a good one to tag the data
Yeah.
next.
Tag the data and balance it with the qualitative. Any other responses? Okay. Please do keep putting in your ideas, and I'm just going to shift my window a bit. So let's look at a couple of examples of what that might look like, right? So we think of this, especially when we think about qualitative data, we think about three specific types of information. One is short form data, right? So if you have surveys, how do you add open-ended responses? And as an example, from our case study, let's look at a farmer baseline, right? So I have opened up, I had pre-filled one of these baseline surveys. So on the right, what you're seeing, what the form that I'm scrolling through is on our platform dots. We've set up a sample form, right? Just to show you what that might look like. So like any other baseline, you'll have some, quantitative questions. You might collect like a number input, so on and so forth. And you can have different questions. But I think one of the things that we often miss out on, and that's a great opportunity, is to have some open-ended questions as well within a survey that you might be doing. So in our case, we've asked what is the biggest benefit that the FPO has brought to you, right? Or what is the biggest problem or difficulty with the FPO? And what change would make the FPO most useful to you? And these are useful questions to ask when you're entering a space, or since this is a baseline style survey, you can continue asking this question in your midlines and so on, right? And what that does is it gives you a useful starting point qualitatively, even if you've not been, to attach to the quantitative data that you might have. The other one is around ongoing data collection, right? And this is where, our what we talked about of having the community voice coming in, or your field staff reporting routine visits becomes really, really important. So as we know, very often your program staff will be out in the field, and what they are able to do is they anyways usually have to report back, their field notes, their observations, etc. What we want them to do is to be able to capture that, not just in terms of like a reporting, I went here, I went there, and answering a survey, but actually sharing their impressions, right? So this is the idea here is that field staff has gone and done a routine visit with a farmer called Lata, uh, added some of their metadata, right? And we'll come to the structure part a little bit in a few minutes, but just want to show this to you. And then, starts adding some rich information about that visit. And on the Dots platform, what we also do is we help that, field staff by giving them some hints. So if you're giving some context about that routine visit, what all can they potentially talk about, right? And so they are not questions they have to answer, but they're hints. They are, is pushing them to say a little bit more than they normally might. The next one is, like many of you all mentioned earlier, are IDIs or FGDs or KIIs. And in our case, just as a demonstration, we said, what if, it is an IDI with a farmer, right? So this could be a farmer called Ramesh. Again, tagging with metadata becomes really, really important. And then you can put in the interview transcript, right? So we've just copy pasted a transcript over here, right? And so you have that entire interview potentially being on the platform. And that way you can see that on a single platform, I have, quant plus qual from my baseline or midline surveys. I have my field staff, putting in notes from their routine visits, and my periodic, interview or FGD transcripts also make their way onto the same platform. So then the question is really, how do you structure that data for analysis, right? And the idea here is that you look at it in terms of, um, sorry, I'm just seeing some messages. Okay. You see that in terms of templates, right? And so you saw a little bit of that right now. I showed you a few structures. It's important to tag the data, which means how do you add the right metadata so that when you come for analysis, when you're looking at all that data for analysis, you're able to slice that data according to location, certain demographics, or create cohorts based on which you can really analyze that data deeply to discern patterns. And lastly, especially with qualitative data, it becomes very important to annotate the data, right? And one way that it looks like is this, where, sorry, I'll just go here so you can see it in a bit more detail. So this is how we look at it, right? So the idea is that you have tags like this, that where you're able to as ascribe a whole bunch of other information to some metadata that is relevant to you, could be sub programs, etc. Um, having a sorry Having annotations also then helps a lot. I'm just going to pause my share for a second and show you what that annotation can look like. Sorry. Um,
I can quickly screen share.
okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So as Akshay was sharing, there are different types of structuring for us. There is metadata, which becomes really important to connect data sets. So one of this example is what is the state, what is the district, what is the block. It gets easy to discover data across these things, and when all these are connected across different data sets, patterns can really emerge beautifully. The second point is annotation. So what Akshay shared here was a layer in case there is data that is not connected to each other. There are still ways to thematically structure this. So what we have on dots, and there are also available on many other platforms, is ways of thematically tagging data under three themes, sub-themes, and tags, for it to be connected to different data sets, for you to see patterns across different data sets. So what happens when all this comes together, right? Which is like metadata, your template, your annotations. You're just enabling a little bit of structure to your qual data while it's known to be the unstructured data, but applying a little bit of structure for it to then be not just labels, right? They are ways in which you break your qualitative data down into those snippets and units, and then it's not overwhelming anymore. So a lot of people also shared that that's too much data. How do you deal with it? It's similar to some logics you apply to the con, but basically breaking it down for it to be discoverable, searchable, and essentially you're organizing it and taking it step by step to analyze. Um, so just also on this point, what Akshay shared at the beginning, which is how do you design the whole system, keeping in mind your needs? A lot of organizations think that there are different tools for different things, which is important. I mean, and different tools handle language collection, storage. Our approach to solving for this is not to replace them, but making them talk to each other. You may already have different systems for collection. You may have different systems for language. Honestly, there might be better tools available for different things also. And the idea is, how do you make sure that they are talking to each other? So an example of this is, suppose you already have data collection in the form of survey, CTO, Kobo, different tools that you might have, or data collection is happening on WhatsApp, right, through bots. Or it could be, as Akshay shared, there's dots also enables that data collection layer. But in case it already exists, we don't have to recreate the wheel. All we have to do is a way to bring it together. And in terms of language, a lot of people say that, oh, do you have a language layer? And there are so many organizations doing such interesting work in translation for Indian languages specifically. It could be for other languages in other countries also. How we are solving for is by integrating those systems within the tool. So your data comes in together as from different sources. It can pass through the layer of another tool like Sarvam is what we have, and do the annotations meta tagging on our platform and also do the analysis on dots. What Akshay can share very quickly is how this layer works, which is in how can integration through another tool, and showing only a small part of it. There are many other integrations that we can share, maybe if you're interested after this session. But I'll just stop screen share for Akshay to take us through how an integration like this works.
So what you can do is if you're importing some data, you can use the Sarvam integration. I've set it up already over here. So this is a play acting, role playing call that we did where a farmer is called to do a survey.
तो आपने अपनी ज्यादातर फसल कहाँ बेची है, या लाइक किसी स्थानीय व्यापारी के पास या मंडी या बाजार में?
हाँ, नहीं मैं समझ रहा हूँ। तो थोड़ा हमने एफपीओ को दिया था, लेकिन
हाँ।
ज्यादा हिस्सा जो है हमने गांव के व्यापारी को ही बेचा था।
अच्छा। सो आपने लगभग कितना हिस्सा आप एफपीओ के माध्यम से बेच?
So this is a call that my colleague Shivna and I play acted a couple of days ago, just to kind of show you what that might be in our context, right? So collecting data can be done through phone calls, and there are great organizations out there that do this as a service, and you might get that data in the form of audio files or a thing. We also understand that survey CTO surveys also collect audio, right? And so here we've used the Sarvam API to do that transcription, right? So I can transcribe that um, on the platform, but I'll just quickly show you what that looks like so we don't waste time. Essentially, an LLM, a model like Sarvam, can give you output in many forms. So this first form that you can see is simply a transcription, plain transcription of the conversation in Hindi. It can give you a translation in English. It can give you a diarized transcript, which means that it gives you a breakdown of which speaker is saying what, transcribed, and then similarly, the same thing diarized as English. And that's what a lot of these newer models, etc., have gotten really good. And Sarvam is fantastic for some of the major languages. There are other models like Bhashani, etc., that have a wider range of languages that are possible. So just wanted to show you how some of these models can be used to overcome some of the challenges that organizations like yours face with language. Back to you, Yashna.
Yeah. The second point and the second stage of data that we're going to talk about is the analysis and decision making. Again, I'd like to start with you all in terms of what does analysis enable? What do you think with qualitative analysis? What can we do with it? Anything you think the analysis can enable with call? We can present the realistic picture inclusive of lived experiences. We can understand if the interventions need modification. That's great. Help in deriving to interpretations. Decision making makes us the right decision. Super, that's amazing. Yeah, I think one very important thing, as you said, it should enable decision making, but like how collection is not equal to using, surveys are not equal to understanding, and reports are not equal to decisions. We often feel that, oh, we'll get a report and that's about it. We need a structured way to answer what deserves attention. And it just doesn't have to be limited to themes for a report, but how do you get those actionable signals? And as very rightly mentioned by a few of you, which is that how do you know that there is a need for modification? That's what an analysis should enable. Another question for you all to answer, and in chat, who is doing the analysis in your team and who is making the decisions? If you can share that. A few more from the last one. Help us map needs of community. That's great. Yeah, analysis and decisions by is okay. SHG group leaders. Great. Research, doing analysis, and policymakers. Analysis, design team. Decisions, once in that was an interesting one. It moved up. Decisions, design team in collaboration with leadership. Thanks, Lena. I do the analysis. Decision making happens at the admin level in the district. That's interesting. M&E, assessors, analysis, project managers, and leadership decision making. M&E doing analysis, decisions by the management. That's superb. Thank you for sharing those inputs. If there are more ideas on or different ways in which your organization is working, that we'd love to hear that. Just for us, and because we feel quite strongly on how decisions and analysis should happen with qualitative as well as quantitative data, is that data shouldn't just sit with M&E teams and leadership, while some of you have mentioned it otherwise. But the idea for us is, how can the people on the ground, like volunteers, field staff, coordinators, should also see their data for the purpose of decision making? And because when people see their own progress, they act, and that's what this whole decentralization of decision making happens. You're not just keeping analysis at the admin, at the leadership level. You are also giving however much control is needed for a different coordinator, for a field staff, for a volunteer to have. That much is important for them to see, because only then there are faster local decisions, better program decisions, less. It's not just limited to anecdotal reporting, right? And there's like a shared understanding across roles. So you can give access to different stakeholders for it to then be that, okay, this is where it's headed, this is where the direction of the program is, because you saw it through the program, how decisions were playing out. If you can think of one decision your field team makes weekly and what qualitative signal would help them make it better. If you can share that on chat again, would love to hear. And if this is a newer concept, please reflect, please share what your thoughts are on this. If a field team can take their own decision, they already do it, how can qualitative data add to that? What are the top priority decision agenda in SHG group meetings? Okay, that's interesting. Anyone else? Budgeting, nice. One of the important ones. Would also love to hear if you're thinking about this concept. It's new, it's something already existed, but you have some thoughts on it. It may not work, all that. Love to hear different thoughts. I think we'll move on to just keep the time in check, but please keep the chat live. And please hold this question with yourselves of how can we enable analysis and decision making at the field staff level as well. So Akshay, if you can take over from here.
So coming back to our case study, right? Just to remind you what the case study was. The idea was that there is a non-profit working on rural livelihoods, and their program essentially is about strengthening, helping to strengthen existing FPOs. And part of the role of the field staff is also to work with the farmers who are members of the FPOs to understand what issues are there and use that to also strengthen the FPO, right? So they're not interacting just with the board and the CEO of the FPO, but really also with the members, the farmer members of the FPO. So in this case, what we're going to show you essentially is, let's imagine that at 3 levels, the data needs to be analyzed and understood for decisions at very, very different scales as well, right? So the strategy team, the regional leads, and the field staff, right? So what would that look like? So what we've done is essentially we've set up a few different data sets, right? One is that, the FPO, I'm just going to zoom in here so that everybody can see clearly. The FPOs are registered on the platform. The farmer's master list is, so that, you can keep accessing different aspects of, their makeup, their demographics, or other such details. For farmers, we have 3 data sets, the baseline and midline survey. So we've imagined that in this data set, there was a baseline done at at the beginning of the program, and 2 midlines have happened so far. So we see this data set at this point in time is in the middle of the program. So 2 midline surveys have been done. Farmers are called after every harvest to do a quick survey. You heard a sample of Shivna talking to me, and that is also done. And farmers are visited routinely by the field staff, and to understand where they are, to offer support, maybe to do a little bit of capacity building as well. Similarly, FPOs, we have baseline midline surveys with FPOs. The FPO is visited routinely by the field staff, and we have a system by which FPO CEOs are directly reporting stories into the platform as well. So these are the sort of different data sets that we have access to. One can, look at some of that data directly if they want to, using things like our overview dashboard, so that you can kind of see all the different data of across your whole sample, go into that in detail if one wants to. But let's come back to what we were talking about, which is, what does somebody who's looking at the program overview want to see, right? And so we're looking at that data in the middle of the program. So we've just set up a sample report using some of this synthetic data, right? So first, you want to just get a sense of what the overall program size is. So we've kind of represented that 18 FPOs across the whole program. The sample is about 935 farmers that data has been collected with. And then you have a breakdown of saying which state. So we have 3 states here, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Bihar. These are the 3 states that we've pulled the synthetic data for. And there is a breakdown of what are the agro zones, right? So the FPOs are in what agroecological zone, right? And you start getting some of that information. Now, the important thing is this looks at the farmer baseline and the latest midline. What are the changes, right? So in terms of the farmer's impression of the level of their choices in terms of who they want to sell to, right? That hasn't increased dramatically, right? There's a difference. Most of the farmers are between 2 and 5. So it's a good increase, but it's not a massive shift. And a lot of them are between 2 and 3. So you're able to start seeing those kinds of shifts, right? Between baseline and midline. Similarly, their impression of whether they're getting an honest market rate for their produce, you start seeing pretty decent shifts. And the shift in trust in FPOs, there's a smaller shift there, right? There isn't a massive shift. And so that can start giving you indications that perhaps That's the part that really needs to be worked on, right? And so you can design new materials around that, support your field staff to be able to build that trust a little more, right? Now, the other thing that one could look at potentially is, in the baseline, we had a open-ended question where we asked, respondents, the farmers, what was their sense of the biggest problems they face, right? And so you got a whole bunch of open-ended responses, right? So these aren't, checkbox or multiple choice questions. These were open-ended responses. And out of the responses that we have, we've done is we've seen what themes are emerging. And out of those themes, we're seeing that institutional trust and transparency issues were one big problem. Market and price challenges were the second big issue that came up, right? And now we look at, a couple of years later, the program has been running. What are the biggest benefits of the program that the farmers are now, talking about when we go back for the midline survey? Again, this is an open-ended, thing. So this is what we mean, where in your input sources, don't just have checkboxes, because then you're going to only see the things that you expect to see. Whereas if you have open-ended responses, right, we can start seeing what is emerging out of, what people are saying, right? So people are talking about market benefits, comprehensive value, and a very interesting one, which is equity and inclusion concerns, are things that have helped them through the program. And then to support that, you can start looking at very specific, quotes from the different transcripts, call logs, interviews, etc., that are tagged to specific tag categories or tags, right? But sometimes you want to explore those sorts of annotations, if you remember what Yashna showed you, and that's where you want to be able to look at all the annotations from different data sources all in one place. What I could do, for example, is say that I want to look at specifically, what farmers are saying, right? So I remove the sources that are related to FPOs. So I want to see specifically what farmers are saying. And then, I can kind of see what are some of the key tags that they have talked about. And I see that trust in FPO is something they've talked a lot about. They've talked a lot about credit access. So these were some of the tags that we have applied to this qualitative data, right? But what becomes useful as a person looking at programs is that you have a hunch, right? I want to actually see, what is it that people who don't attend meetings regularly, right, or they've never attended meetings, I want to see specifically what they are talking about, right? And so you see that the ones who aren't attending are talking more about coping strategies. They're talking about operational capacity, right? Credit access becomes like the most important thing that they're talking about. And then before you jump in and start looking at the actual annotations, you want to get a quick summary of what the annotations are, really broadly, what the key themes or insights out of that might be. So as a program manager, you're able to then start digging in and start looking for patterns. If there is something that might not be, you might have an inkling of something that you want to try and understand, right? So here, these are the sorts of tools that become available to you, or methods that one can apply when all your data is well structured and connected to each other. It has been organized, so you've done the annotation, etc. Right? Now, the one of the things that Yashna mentioned is a danger is that we expect AI to do things magically. A lot of people report that they take their qualitative data, chuck it into chat GPT and ask for insights. Whereas our kind of philosophy is that it's more important for you to start looking at some of those details. I'm getting messages about time check. So I'm just going to move on a little bit quickly. What if you're a regional supervisor, right? As a regional supervisor, I'm looking only at the state of Bihar. That's my, purview. And part of the reason I'm looking at the data is so that I can support my field staff. So I'm looking at the data as it's coming in, I'm monitoring the data so that I'm able to, when I do my weekly check-ins with my field staff, I'm able to give them insight from across the state, right? So again, I just see what is the scale of what I'm looking at, the 6 FPOs, 330 farmers, and then I see that I get a summary of the farmer notes from the latest set of visits that my field staff has done. And so they're talking about some crop status, harvest outcomes, debt management, asset utilization, how the FPOs are doing, what are some challenges and areas for improvement. And so this is specifically just from Bihar, right? But what I'm also quickly looking at is what are some of the tags looking like. So these counts show you what are some of the sub themes, which is the broader themes that we're looking at, and which are some of the most tagged pieces. So we see operational capacity and trust in FPO, very, very important. Credit access seems to be slightly more important when we look at that in terms of how it intersects with livelihood security, right? And so we then are also able to see, and so then the regional manager is also looking at what FPO CEOs are saying so that they can give this input to the field staff as well, having that broader overview. And then again, like we said, how do you see some of the actual quotes of what people are talking about? Lastly, let's look at what our field staff might want to do, right? So what we've done here is our, Ask AI. We've applied a couple of filters of, if you can see here on the left, we've applied a couple of filters, which is to say that look at only the farmer information and let's look at a single farmer. So this is their anonymized farmer ID. So of course the field staff knows who is who. So they filtered for that particular farmer. So any questions they ask are specifically for that farmer. And why would somebody use this? So let's imagine the field staff is going out to meet this farmer and they want a quick summary of everything the farmer has talked about in the recent past, right? So they could open up the Ask AI on their phone and ask a quick couple of questions. So what are some of the experiences of this particular farmer? Right? And they get a summary from everything that farmer has reported, whether that's in their baseline, whether it's in a call log. Tell me some of the farmer's thoughts on interactions with the FPO. And so this particular farmer has talked about trust and loyalty, price and trust rating, challenges that they faced, so on, right? And lastly, the field staff might want to just get a broad idea for the FPO they are looking at. What were some of the things that the CEO was reporting at the start of the program? So in the first quarter, they worked with them, and in the most recent quarter that they worked with them. What have in the latest set of calls that were done with the farmers across this FPO, what were some of the things that the farmers reported? And so what we see is when you have well-structured data, lots of data sources, and you're able to bring it together, different stakeholders can make sense of it in very, very different ways. So that's some of these thoughts we have. Yashna, back to you. Oh, wow, the chat is
I
got
think
stuck.
there are a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So we'll move to questions. Just one point that a few points that we haven't covered. One is the kind of analysis that are being run at the back end. So we've not covered all that because we wanted to share more around the decentralized decision making and how analysis can help. Where, as Roop shared, we're happy to answer some of those questions on outside this webinar. There are a few questions that came in on the tagging structure and how does the platform tag. So I'll just quickly answer, although I have answered in some of these questions and chats. There are currently what we're doing is we give the option for people who are managing the platform to add tags and themes. However, and then you can have there are many options. You can manually tag for sure, but there are AI suggestions where human approves. or there is a complete AI annotation option also. So you essentially just import your data, and if you have the option of complete AI annotation, it will run through the data, and your analysis starts running immediately after that AI annotation loop is complete. What we are going to soon add is there are some preset tags or some tags that can come up from the data is something we are looking at. But currently the tags and themes are by the organization team to set up. So I hope that that has gotten clear as one big chunk of point. There is another point on data privacy. I think it's a big one. We have a lot of access level, access control on the platform. Who can add data? Who can see data? How can you view data? There are multiple levels. Also, I just want to clarify there are two types of subscriptions. It's a SaaS subscription platform. So there are two types of subscription. One is for analysis, just the analysis layer where you have data import from different places. And any organization can actually just take that set up and you can start working. It's a self-managed way. The other is an enterprise way where we work with organizations to understand their data structure. They also use our entire collect module, and we have multiple integrations, custom integrations, etc., that are possible in the enterprise. And those are things how we approach is understand from an organization their needs and then work with it. Of course, the self-manage is an easier, ready to go kind of a thing. But if your organization is quite large, we can work on the entire system as well. So that's, I feel, the second set of questions that came up. Anything else that you feel we should quickly answer since we have 4 minutes left? Yes. So the other point is very important, what Akshay also made, and we never got a chance to go over, is data over time. That's also the reason why dots, one very big reason that dots exist, that how do you see data over time? Because it does get, the idea is to evaluate over time. And these one-off AI systems, I think somebody else also asked in chat, one-off AI systems have don't have that visibility over time. So how we tag and structure and timestamp data, there's a lot of change over time that can be studied on the tool and then viewed by different stakeholders for different purposes. So again, that is a possibility which we don't get a chance to share much in the webinar, but definitely one of the use cases for the platform. Yes, a lot of our data approaches are on quantification of call data. Happy to talk about that outside, but a lot of correlations, etc., are some things that are coming, patterns which are prevalent from our quantification, which is our annotated data, is possible on the reports feature, where you can just pull in different things in the analysis feature, where you can pull in different tags and themes. Yes, Akshay.
And the AI categorization is actually a really useful overview to quantify, especially short form qualitative data. So if you're setting up surveys, very often we ask a question which says, did you attend the training? Yes or no? But, we rarely ask the why. Did you not attend, or why were you able to attend? And we are then able to categorize and quantify that and see what the
one very quick point I'll make: our next newsletter is going to focus on the kinds of analysis and how dots are doing, where all these questions will get answered. So please do subscribe if you haven't, or just share your email ID so we can send you that newsletter. It will be of course, available on LinkedIn as well, which is essentially on the kinds of call data and how do you analyze. What, again, reiterating what was the purpose of today's session was how can different stakeholders also view the output from these an analyzed input. So yeah, yes, we can add you to the newsletter, Shraddha. Super. Thanks, Lagna. Anything else before we end? We have a minute left. We do have all your emails also. When during registration, we can add all of you if that's okay with everyone. Super. And I think we can do another session on kinds of analysis and how DOTS does because of the interest in this topic. Happy to share that also. If we are able to do a session like that, we'll be shooting out an email on that. Superb. Thank you for giving us the next topic of the webinar.